How about we start the show with something even more bizarre? Chicken feet.
Chicken feet are our most important business story today?
Well, it's actually about the US-China trade war, anti-dumping measures, and hidden tariffs. But I was worried that if I said that, it might scare people off.
Trade wars, hidden tariffs, and anti-dumping measures. I suspect this is precisely why people listen to this podcast. Okay, so what are the details?
So, US chicken giant Sanderson Farms has ruffled its feathers and kickstarted exports of chicken's feet to China after a complete ban on American poultry supplies was lifted last month, according to Bloomberg. The US company sent its first container of chicken's feet last month and is loading another 12 boxes this week, despite the fact that there's still a 35% tariff on the goods due to the trade war between the two countries.
Now, this still seems like a pretty poultry matter, but why should we give a cluck about this story?
I really think you should leave the puns to me. Okay, but this is why it's important. First, many people are interpreting the shipment as a sign that businesses are expecting the trade war between the US and China to cool off in the coming months. Sanderson Farms CEO Joe Sanderson said as much himself, stating that he expects the 35% tariff to be lifted pretty soon. Second, the story exposes how countries use non-tariff barriers to hinder trade. China imposed the ban on US poultry in 2015, following an outbreak of highly contagious avian influenza. But, and this is the important point, China kept the restriction even after nearly all other nationwide bans had been removed. So this was seen by many in the US as a non-tariff barrier to trade, using health and safety as just an excuse. Third, this may all be a consequence of African swine fever and how China is trying to make up for what it calls the protein gap created by the loss of pigs by importing more chicken meat. However, the fourth and thankfully final reason I love this story, because I'm actually running out of fingers, is because it's about anti-dumping measures and how difficult it is to work out what is and what isn't dumping.
By dumping, you mean a country selling exports for less than they're worth to get an unfair advantage in a foreign market?
Yeah, that's right. US consumers love white meat when it comes to chicken, the breast and the thigh. And so dark meat and other cuts of the chicken, like their feet, have very little value. American farmers often sell these unpopular cuts very cheaply abroad. The alternative is just like literally throwing them in the bin or giving them to animals to eat. The US has therefore come under criticism for effectively dumping this meat and decimating poultry production in places like Africa and the Caribbean. US farmers argue that they're not dumping their offcuts because the way you judge whether something is dumping is by calculating how much it costs to produce and sell in the whole market. And as these offcuts are effectively a byproduct in the US, they're very cheap to produce, and as US consumers don't like to eat them, they have very little sales value. China and other countries, however, see their domestic producers being undercut and effectively see this as a kind of dumping. All of this foul play just shows how complicated analysing the fairness of trade between different countries is. It might just be chicken's feet today, but it shows how two sides can take the same issue and have diametrically opposing views, and yet both be kind of right.
Or at least have a reasonable argument.
Indeed, and one last point, picking up on your awful pun earlier, this is no poultry matter. US poultry exports to China are projected to top $1 billion a year, according to US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. That's no small amount.